Who's in control this offseason for the Charlotte Hornets? We'll discuss that with David Walker making his weekly appearance, and we'll give you some NBA Finals takes all today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first team. First team? First listen? We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. That includes YouTube. There's David Walker. He's a part of our first team all LOH. You can find him on Twitter at David B. Walker. There's Doug Branson. You can find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. And I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I'm glad to see David. I'm also you look younger without the goatee going on. Absolutely younger, but part of me misses the Tekken character that you were for the last couple of appearances.
I know. We'll see what happens this summer, guys. My barber told me it keeps your face cool, actually, if you have some facial hair on there. So we'll see if I can pull it off again. I just thought we had to do new looks every show now. I mean, Doug had the haircut, then the shave, and then I thought I should shave. And so, we're just keeping it moving.
Your barber meant cool in the colloquial sense. I mean, you did look cool. You looked wise. You looked sage. You looked like you had wisdom. Right. But I don't know about this whole idea that facial hair makes your face cooler. Makes it itchier for sure.
It does make it. Yeah, Nada had a different look. I was sporting a sunburn, pasty white look a couple of episodes ago.
Well,
so
there we go.
Well, let me just say this, because we've done a lot of talking about changing looks and different things. I'm just going to tell folks, we've been doing this for, this is our 7th or 8th year doing the podcast in some kind of form, and we've gotten older. And as we continue to get older, this is only going to get worse. A few of us are about to enter our midlife crises. So buckle up.
That's that. I do want to go back. I wish you guys have some YouTube episodes before we really went to YouTube, right? And so maybe we could go back and see you guys the before and
they'll
after
do
picture.
like the pictures before the presidents go into the White House and when they come out. If the Hornets ever make the playoffs again.
Oh my God. Yes. We have to see what we look like then and what the Hornets have done to us physically. When we say sickos, we mean that, but I think mostly we mean it from a mental health perspective, but I think we also mean it because, look, the mind and the body are connected. It has to have taken some kind of toll on us physically.
There is not a better example of what you just said than going back to see a picture of James Borrego at his introductory press conference and the day he leaves Spectrum Center. It is a monster difference. Steve Clifford going through actual health problems because he's staying up too late at night trying to fix this team. Charles Lee, you look good. You're young. Enjoy it while it lasts, buddy, because it's not going to last very much longer.
Welcome to hell.
Welcome to hell, Lee. Welcome to hell. All right, let's try to fix hell, shall we? This offseason, I want to take those steps in order to do so. And, Doug, you have something interesting here via the Rod Boone article on the Charlotte Observer. He says a certain somebody is in control of the offseason. And you would like to think that Jeff Peterson is in control. I think everybody would be comforted by that fact. But that's not what Rod Boone writes on the Charlotte Observer.
Well, Jeff Peterson, Schlotkin, Rick Schnall, Gabe Plotkin, one of these cats, I would love for someone to be in control for sure. That will be making decisions not just next season, but many seasons after this. That's the whole idea. When you let a player that may or may not play for you, but because of trades or whatever, when you let that aspect control your offseason, you can get into a lot of trouble. And so Rod Boone here in his latest column for the Charlotte Observer titled "Charlotte Hornets Key Offseason Roster Moves Hinge on What Happens with Miles Bridges," and I want to just go to the final graph here. And Rod Boone writes, no matter how it's dissected, the common denominator doesn't change. Bridges holds the car keys and is in complete control of the direction the Hornets are about to embark on. He's in the driver's seat, reclining in cushy comfort while deciding what the future has in store for him and the franchise trying to end the NBA's longest postseason drought. And I'll just say for me, fellas, that idea bristled me a little bit, rubbed me the wrong way. And I don't even know if Rod Boone is really wrong in saying all of that when you look at the previous past few off seasons that have been, I think hijacked would be a good word, by by Miles Bridges and his actions and the court filings and all of these things that really froze the previous regime and what they could do in the offseason. And now the idea that is impending free agency is going to be the controlling factor of this offseason. It really grinds my gears.
Yeah, but doesn't that lead you to believe that has been their intention? I know you guys talked about this with Nada yesterday. Would Miles Bridges be there at media day, right? And I was kind of with you, Doug, in saying that if they've gone through all of this just to kind of pull the plug at the last minute when they have a chance to commit, it just seem hard to believe. And so from that standpoint, I guess you can see where Rod's coming from, is that it's up to Bridges. Should he try and get a huge contract somewhere else? Should he try and move on? I find a hard time to believe that he will give them a hometown discount, as you've said. But it just feels like they've put a lot of eggs in the Miles Bridges basket. And to your point, for the third offseason in a row we're staring into.
You had something, Doug?
Well, look, there's no incentive. I don't think there's any incentive for Miles Bridges not to maximize the dollar amount. It's not like Charlotte as a franchise presents him with an opportunity to go deep into the playoffs or some of these other incentives. I'm sure, I don't know, it seems like he spends a lot of time out west. So I don't think that like Charlotte as a city is some like attractive piece of this puzzle. And so I think it's all going to be maximizing the dollar amount. And I think Charlotte as a franchise should really have already decided whether they are willing to go as far as they want to go to bring Bridges back. Because, look, they get a chance if, and it was in this article, if this series, this NBA Finals series doesn't go 7 games, which it doesn't look like it's going to. By the way, I've got an NBA Finals take that has a Charlotte Hornets flavor to it later on in the show. Stay tuned for that.
Are you going to make another prediction now that it's 3-0? Are you going to lock in your prediction from 2-0?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, now there's no better time. There's no better time to lock in a prediction than when a series is gone 3-0. Mm-hmm. But no, I've got another take. It has nothing to do with PJ Washington, so it's a brand new, new fresh take. It's all about Svi Mikhailuk. Just get ready for that. Where was I? And here's where here's where I was. I think the franchise should already have that decided, and if they get a chance to negotiate with Bridges early, don't fool around. Either make the big time offer and move forward with this, whatever you envision as the core, and let's figure it out from there, or part ways and give yourself plenty of options to either get bad and go after a Cooper Flag or add some other talent around this roster and see what you got. I just think I don't want this thing to drag on like it has so often with, you just look back to PJ Washington and how long those negotiations took. I'm just saying they need to get this figured out, and the person that should be in control of the franchise should be Schlotkin and Jeff Peterson and not Miles Bridges.
Yeah, 100%. I understand that that's the first domino that has to fall before you make other decisions, but it doesn't have to be Miles Bridges driving the vehicle.
What has he done? What has he done to earn that? You know what I'm saying? He's never even made an all-star game. He didn't lead this team. He had the ball in his hands along with Brandon Miller a majority of the time. Yes, there were extenuating circumstances with the injury, but Miles Bridges is not a guy who is going to lift an entire franchise on his back and take him to glory. So I just don't know what he's done to control an entire team's offseason. It's honestly the idea of that. It's been absurd that they've wasted this much time figuring this out, and it would be even more absurd if it results in him going to Detroit. But at the same time, I just think that the franchise needs to have a clear vision and at some point tell us all what that vision is, but have a clear vision and execute on it quickly and not waste time this offseason because there's too much to do.
We've got more to discuss on that. Let's do it. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
More Miles Bridges thoughts, Charles Lee coaching Summer League, and Doug has an NBA Finals take. That's still to come. Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. We appreciate Game Time, as always. They are your spot to go get last-minute tickets. They can get they make NBA Finals tickets even easier and faster to get.
Get them. You better get them fast.
I mean, right now. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And speaking of all those deals, you have priority last-minute deals, flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, and the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Again, create an account and then redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. More Locked On Hornets ahead. A few more Miles thoughts real quickly. One, Doug, you said hijack. We just can't get away from the Con Air references. It's not within our realm of possibility. Two, we go with Miles Bridges and how he has controlled the offseason. The last 3 off seasons, it feels like they have been trying to figure out what they're going to do there. I will say that was with the previous regime.
Yeah.
They have a new regime here. We'll see how different that is. But the other thing is we can go back to the deadline when the scuttlebutt, not any official reporting, but it certainly felt like Miles was the guy that was going to be out the door more than PJ. Remember, PJ Washington was not really in a lot of these trade rumors, unlike maybe previous off seasons or previous deadlines. It was Miles. He was going to go to Phoenix. They like that $7 million, $8 million deal where clearly the talent is better than that on a per year basis. But then Clutch Agency, they come in and say, hell nah, we're staying right here in Charlotte. We're not going to accept any trade because we have that veto because of the qualifying offer. So we're staying right here. And then once that happened, they had to shift to PJ. Maybe he would have been traded all along. Who knows? But it was PJ that was traded, and Miles finished out the season racking up higher raw numbers, at least with the Hornets, than maybe he would have with Phoenix, right? You have to imagine with KD, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker over there. So I'm not entirely sure that they have operated at the level of trying to keep Miles Bridges here the whole time. They did the first 2 off seasons, but it does seem like maybe they were shifting in a different direction once they wanted to trade him. And then it took Rich Paul and Miles Bridges to say, nope, we're not going anywhere. We're staying right here. So maybe everything that we're hearing, why Nada is so sure that he's not going to make it to media day, the comments that make us believe that the Hornets do have a very clear direction, which is what Grant Williams described it on the podcast that he appeared on in the last 2 days, that the Hornets actually have a clear direction now. I think there's been evidence of that, especially since Schlotkin took over. Like, yeah, maybe the writing is on the wall that Miles will not be back, and they really do value that $30 million in cap space. I think we've seen some of those signs. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. We just don't know how much of the conversations were had, in the coach hiring process. Like, how much of this core did he like, right? I mean, I think you guys talking about the LaMelo trade stuff earlier this week, and I won't admonish you guys for that today. I won't bash you anymore for those for those discussions. But like, that's something that you certainly want to give him a run at. So like, it'll be interesting to see maybe how much Lee was in on any conversation saying, hey, you've got a nice little setup there. If we could keep Miles in the fold for another couple of years and let me have a run at that thing, we'll see how it goes. But certainly more than the last 2 years, they've hinted at being more willing to move on. My only question is, what are they feeling? Let's say Miles Bridges does not return. We've been over the free agent crop that's coming up this offseason. I don't know. They're not going to get any of the main guys, the top guys. You wouldn't think. It's going to be hard to fill 20 points per game, no matter who you get. I don't think you're getting in the draft. So that's the tricky part about this whole thing. I just don't know how committed they are to running this thing back, as it were, with Charles Lee and giving him a shot.
No, for sure. To be clear, if they don't go after Miles Bridges, you're in for another player development rebuilding year for sure. I mean, unless
How often can you do that? I mean, how many more LaMelo seasons can you do that?
Yeah. I mean, well, if he would play, that would help them not to do that, for sure. But I think the LaMelo piece of this is interesting. I think the trade deadline and the veto move is super interesting because I think for Miles, and his team, that was a shrewd move. Because if you go to Phoenix and you take a reduced role, or even if you go to Phoenix and you have a big role, but some of those inefficiencies that we saw from Miles Bridges and his scoring ability that showed up in Charlotte, if those showed up and ruined, the chances of Phoenix moving on in the playoffs, although they did a great enough job of ruining that themselves, but if that had shown up, that would have severely damaged. But his whole, I think, what is going to make him money this offseason is the unknown. Because you can look at this situation in Charlotte. LaMelo not playing actually helped, I think, Miles Bridges because people are going to look at that situation and trick themselves into thinking, well, LaMelo wasn't there. So they had a lot of injuries. We can look past some of the inefficiencies, look how much he scored. He can do that for our team, and we've got more talent, blah, 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 on down the line. And for Charlotte on the LaMelo piece, if LaMelo had played a full season and gotten back to all-star form and then went to the front office and said, hey, Miles Bridges is my guy, and I got to play with my guy. And I know I just signed the contract, but I can make a stink. I can easily make a stink if you don't bring my guy back. But he has no leverage like that. He's the no leverage with this front office right now. You've got to actually play some games to have some leverage. So that is not I don't think that the whole LaMelo factor is going to be a thing at all in these negotiations.
Much to your delight, I agree with everything you said.
Yes, show over.
Miles Bridges going to Phoenix.
Podcast over.
Yeah, that's it. We're done. Actually, the whole series, we're done.
Yeah.
Go back to we can start to do the before and after picture right now. We are as after as we'll ever be because this is the end of the show. Miles Bridges deciding not to go to Phoenix along with his agency. That reduced role probably would take money out of his pocket because you much would rather talk yourself into that 20-point per game scorer being
unless
able to.
They could have,
it was a risk.
They could have advanced. It was a risk.
Right.
Like if he was on the Mavs, right, you would think that maybe could have gone up. But I think what we were thinking the whole time, to your point, Walker, was that stay here, pump up those scoring numbers, 20 points a game. Versus maybe a run in the playoffs, it's probably going to be better.
Think about what your role is with Phoenix. It's not exactly the stuff that Miles has done well. So, okay, you go with this three-headed monster in Beal, what is supposed to be the monster with Booker, Beal, and Kevin Durant. Okay, what's your role? Defense, attack, closeouts, but a lot of three-point shooting. Well, we have one outlier season of three-point shooting for Miles. Statistically, that's not been the strongest suit. Saw a lot of mid-range jumpers. It's not like they're wanting to go to Miles for that. They got KD and Devin Booker. They're not trying to go with more mid-range shooting. His role becomes something that he's not been great at in defense and three-point shots. So it's not okay. So now you start to figure out, let's just stay in Charlotte. We got some health concerns. He's going to get the ball a lot. Let him cook, see if he can get those raw numbers up, and then let him make more money out there after that. And then last thing for me with the LaMelo stuff, I will say this. Mitch Kupchak was very consistent at the podium and behind closed doors. He didn't give a damn what LaMelo had to say. He was going to do what he wanted to do. LaMelo could have gone into that locker room or gone into the office and said, I want this. And Mitch would have said, we don't have any all-stars on this team. And then he can go call whoever he wants to trade for whoever he wants to. That was something consistent. I actually don't know how much Gabe Plotkin, Rick Schlotkin, if you will, and Jeff Peterson value the opinion of the young stars. I don't know if they're going to value it more than Mitch, which it's
not until they win some games.
Yeah, right. And Mitch was like pretty close to the bottom with the young stars. This was not Kobe and Shaq in the Lakers days. And Mitch made that very clear. So that's something interesting to ask. If Brandon Miller takes a big step up, maybe he makes an all-star game his second season, but he's still very young. Does the front office start to care about the opinion of Brandon Miller? Or are they going to go Mitch Kupchak and say, nah, we still have a lot of work to do before we're contending? It's an interesting question to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I'd say Brandon has his own podcast that he waxes poetic about basketball and the state of the team. And then he can say, he has nothing to do with what's going on. It's out of his hands. He has no control over anything. He's just talking about it with a buddy.
I'll tell you something, though. Brandon Miller, part of my NBA Finals take coming up.
Oh, all right, let's get to it. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Still need to get to Charles Lee, an interesting comment he had on Anscape.com with Mark Spears reporting on some of the stuff Charles Lee is going through. And then Doug Branson will get to his NBA Finals take. All today, Locked On Hornets. Before we do that, let's get to Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members, and it's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You pick more or less than on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, and you can get in on the daily action with your friends and become a part of the Prize Picks community today. Plus, you can option in for June, where there's always some action, and it's the perfect time to try out something new as basketball is starting to wind down with a 3-0 series lead for the Celtics. Make sure to try out esports this month, because for every Wednesday and Saturday in June, if your lineup does not win for the esports lineup that you pick, you'll get your entry fee back. So you can choose from Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, and plenty more. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. More Locked On Hornets ahead. During the break, I don't even want to get into chaos anymore, but we somehow found ourselves in Jurassic Park 3 and the
Another
Snake
franchise.
I know.
I mean, unbelievable.
Doug, where are you on Jurassic Park 2 and 3 and how bad they are compared to Spider-Man 2 and 3?
I pretend that all Jurassic Parks after the first were just a dream. Like, okay. I take the first, I rewatch the first. Yeah, the rest can just go away.
That's fair. It's a fair take. Before we get off the road, just like we did yesterday, I do want to get to this quote of Charles Lee saying he wants to coach the Summer League squad this year as soon as he comes over to become the head coach of the Hornets. Man, you're going to be talking about weeks, not even a month at that point, maybe right at a month before he coaches his first game in Summer League. You know what? Being a Hornets fan means that this is not a small thing. I love this. I love that Charles Lee is going to take over because we've seen a lot of bad basketball. We've seen a lot of bad Summer League basketball. And we just want something positive here with Charles Lee, your head organizer, doing the best he possibly can to put out something worth watching in Summer League. Doug, does this get you excited as much as it does me that Charles Lee is going to be the Summer League head coach?
Yeah, for sure, because I want to see him in action as a head coach of something as quickly as possible. You just don't – I mean, you see him on the sidelines for these Celtics games, but you just don't get a sense of what he's going to be like as a head coach until he actually does it. So I am super excited. Also, it's going to mean – that he'll get plenty of time with this draft pick. And if it's a high draft pick, that's going to be super important that there's bonding there because it might be a guy from UConn and Stephon Castle. And historically, Hornets coaches and rookies from UConn haven't exactly seen eye to eye. They haven't, one almost hit the other in the eye. And so it would be good if they do draft Castle for those two guys to just bond quickly in Summer League so that they can get started off on the regular season on the right foot.
Hey, he would historically be the best Summer League point guard, maybe in Summer League history. I haven't seen
Charles Lee.
No, yes, Charles Lee would, and Stephon Castle would. You're right.
That would be amazing, man. As soon as you can get Lee in the purple and teal, they have to trot him out for all the interviews, ask him about the ring, ask him about the Celtics, ask him about what he's bringing to the table, and get him into the fold as soon as possible. Hopefully, we'll see. Brandon Miller, some other guys out there in Vegas, right? You've seen that in the past where they kind of go out there and have some meetings or just get used to each other, maybe play and whatever. So, yeah, man, I think it's cool for Charles Lee to get out there and do some coaching in Summer League. And you're right, it'd be fun if they have a high draft pick out there running the show too.
Yeah, I mean, David makes a good point here. It's not just going to be about coaching that team. It's going to be about meeting with players who are there and starting to do that preliminary work of deciding what kind of team this is going to be, what they're going to be working on, what they're going to be focusing on. And he had a little bit to say about that. I mean, he said that in this article with Mark Spears for Anscape, he talked about, I think he had lunch with LaMelo Ball. So there's been just a few little things that have happened, but because he's had to, keep the Celtics hat on, he hasn't had a chance. But another thing that we will get from him being at Summer League is just more indication of what the direction of this franchise is, what Lee's direction, what his focuses are going to be on, because we've had scant information from Jeff Peterson and from Schlotkin on what exactly is going to happen. But we did get a little bit from Lee here, and I might be reading some tea leaves, some Lee leaves, if you will. But here's the quote. I'm just going to let you be the judge, okay? Lee says, quote, "I'm up for the job. I'm up for the task. I have energy for the task, and the people I'm going to surround myself with are going to help me with that task. With what Jeff and his group are building along with ownership, I think we have the right people in place to kind of push us through some of these lean years."
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Put that on the marketing campaign, huh?
Lean years. That's plural. That's multiple years of lean. I need to know what he means by that, although I think I kind of have an idea. That sounds more rebuilding. You don't say lean. I mean, this team needs to bulk up. They don't need to get lean.
So, I mean, this is a whole – I want to – perhaps we can do this question for a later episode because I know, Doug, you want to get to your NBA Finals take.
It's juicy.
Yes.
It is juicy. What does that mean as far as a rebuild? Because
what do you mean? What do you mean lean years? I feel like Cat and Anthony Edwards at the podium. What do you mean? We've lost for like 20 years. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
lean years?
The lean years. It's all we know are the lean years. So are we going to get are we trading big time players now? Are we moving up to is the LaMelo Ball conversation really that prevalent? Are they going to be shopping him? Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a different episode. We already did that one, and we'll do another one. Let's get to your finals take here, Doug. How does it pertain to Brandon Miller?
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with PJ. I've just been watching with a lot of interest the analysis that is happening, the takes that are forming around Luka Doncic, because it hasn't just been about his lack of defense in this NBA Finals series. It's also it finally feels like that national pundits are saying the thing that a lot of fans have noticed, and a lot of I think podcasters and people who pay close attention to the NBA in that local way that we do here on the Locked On Podcast Network have noticed, and that is Luka complains a lot to the officials, and not even in the normal way that players complain a lot to the officials, but it's gone to this extreme level that seems to be hurting him psychologically, that's hurting the team, that's hurting their ability to win finals. And you had Windhorst go on ESPN and say the performance was unacceptable, the defense was unacceptable, the barking at the refs and barking at his own team is unacceptable. And so my take on this is LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, please take notes that complaining with the officials is a part of the NBA, getting them to respect you. There's a whole back and forth that happens. So this idea that you should never complain to the officials is absolutely absurd. You should obviously advocate if you feel like things are, but you can take that to an extreme level. And I really point more to Brandon Miller here, because I saw him barking a lot at the refs last year, and certain refs were telling him, you could hear it on the open mic, they were telling him, dude, back off, stop. I hope that someone can get in his ear at some point, unlike they don't seem to have been able to get through to Luka, that doesn't necessarily end well. For LaMelo, my take would be, the frustration foul that Luka had that took him out of the game with 4 minutes to go, and in a close game, he fouls out. That was a frustration foul. We've seen LaMelo do that a lot, where he gets upset with his own game or something that happened, commits a frustration foul. I would just say those are all cute and fine, and we can go, gosh darn it, maybe don't do that when the Hornets are winning 19 games. But what happens if the Hornets actually do build a winning culture and they do start to win series? These things actually matter, and that's my take.
What do you think, David?
Wow. Yeah, it's funny how fast things can change. Like a week ago, Luka was maybe the best player in the world.
Oh, exactly.
And a big reason, and up front MVP, and now he's like the reason they're losing, the reason they're down 0-3. But I mean, to that point, he quieted down a lot of that during that playoff run, and a lot of people credited it. I tend to credit like the monster games he had, and maybe those are hand in hand, right? I mean, maybe those go back and forth, but I think with Luka, it fires him up a little bit, it gets him going. He obviously talks too much. He's not just talking when you see him talking. He's talking like at every stoppage of play. That's his thing. And I guess, as Windhorst said, they haven't been able to get through to him there. I think this particular instance is a tad overblown just because it is in the finals. They're obviously fighting uphill against a really good Boston Celtics team, and he's doing all he can. But, yeah, I mean, for him to take the next step, it feels like he's going to have to either massage it a little bit differently or just, tamper it down a little bit. But the defensive thing is an issue. I think he was trying to do the right thing, but you just can't foul out in that situation in that game, no matter what you're trying to do. That's the time to actually just get out of the way, and he was trying to make a play.
So, David, I would absolutely agree with you that it's overblown if they were getting blown out in these games. But they're not getting blown out. These are close games, and they're margins of error that are resulting in what the final score ends up being. And so that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, that that controlling your emotions when things get close, that defines teams, that defines championship level players. And I'm not saying that it's a gigantic problem for LaMelo Ball, the frustration fouls, or for Brandon Miller talking to the officials. I'm saying it's something to monitor. And that's why it would be great as these players get better to at the same time establish a culture, an identity, a way that these teams play. Because Boston's not playing like that. Again, they might complain to the officials about one thing or another, but they're not doing that.
Not even close.
No, but that's coming all the way down to Boston.
Exactly.
That's top down. That's top down. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and probably some personality stuff too, but you're right. No, I actually like the whole overblown stuff. I found it really, really bleeping difficult to watch Luka, despite how special he is. Like last night, I thought from the moment the ball was in the air,
and it's desperation.
It was so desperation, and he completely lost his mind. And that was at the very beginning. And remember, he was actually pretty efficient in the first quarter, and then the inefficiency started happening, even offensively, where he was missing a lot of shots on top of being the worst defender on the floor, on top of complaining to the ref every single stoppage. It was every single time that there was dead ball. So now I even heard Kyle Bailey say a stat today. There's an actual stat on this where he got blown by 13 times, which is the most that we've seen. There's too much evidence for terrible defense and just continuously complaining to the refs. Like, I know LeBron gets criticized for this. I never felt about LeBron the way I did watching Luka last night. I was disgusted, man. Like, it was so bad. I couldn't stand watching it. Doug, to your point, LaMelo has actually had the opposite problem. So many fans have asked him to complain more to the officials, and you're asking to not overcorrect, which is the correct take there. I'll give you more credit to you being right on this. Yeah, no, you're right.
I'm up 3-0 in this podcast right now.
A prediction time, bold prediction. I'm going to win the podcast. No, I think you're asking LaMelo to not overcorrect if that ever becomes a problem, which I highly doubt. That would be manufactured because it's just been such a non-issue for him. With Brandon, the only reason it might not be an issue with him is because they play completely different styles of offense. It's so much of having the basketball in your hands. Yeah. Brandon is more secondary ball handler. He's not seeking the type of contact, being this foul merchant that Luka is. And so when you don't get the fouls as a foul merchant, that leads you more to complain to the official. And so I hope that kind of salvages the Brandon stuff, but totally agree with some of the stuff that you're mentioning here. Can you build those winning moments, that winning culture, even if you only win 25 games? Do you still have all of the right stuff in place for when you're ready to go win 50 and compete in the postseason?
And honestly, I hope Luka keeps it up. I hope he just comes out in game 4 in a diaper and a rattle. Like, I really hope he just keeps it up because it's embarrassing and it's being called out. And I think it would, if Brandon Miller is paying attention to the way he's acting at all, and LaMelo looks at the frustration fouls and pays any attention to that, then hopefully something could be learned from this thing being on the highest of high stages in the NBA. Because look, obviously if the Hornets if they lost an NBA Finals because of that, it would be the greatest nightmare of all time because we're thirsty for a playoff series victory, even a playoff win. That would be an amazing problem to have. But it would be sad if we took this journey with the Hornets and watched LaMelo and Brandon become all NBA level players that took the Hornets to the biggest stage, only to have it all come crashing down like it's coming down for Dallas right now because no one was able, either the star couldn't get through to himself or no one was able to get through to the star and say, hey, there's a way that championship players conduct themselves and play, and they do that for a reason. It's not just because it's the right thing to do. It's because it actually results in helping your team the win. So,
yeah. On the good side, Luka's 25, so he feels like he's been in the league for 10 years. But this is his first step on the biggest stage. He knows his shortcomings. The only part I was really, really disappointed in was after the game where he was like, "Come on, refs, you can't foul me out. You can't do that in the finals," which I kind of liked, but because everyone was saying it. But I think today he went on to say, there's holes in my game, I got to fix, And I know this isn't locked on Luka or locked on Dallas, but yeah, I mean, you guys are right. Everybody's calling it out now because it is on a big stage. If you've been watching it up until this point, it's not that much different than what he does basically on a Tuesday night in Charlotte, right? Like he does this all the time. It's just super heightened right now. He's scratching and clawing, they're scratching and clawing, and it has not helped them. That is the bottom line.
Because look, people, I think they hear the word heat culture and they go, whatever, roll their eyes, get out of here with that stuff.
Well, look.
What?
Lowry is the biggest complainer you'll find out there too. So
they don't like him in Miami for those reasons, I think, or and he can't shoot anymore. So look, I think people hear that like winning habit stuff and play the right way, and they roll their eyes a little bit. And when the magnifying glass is put on this kind of situation on the biggest stage, I think it is a reminder because look, oftentimes these finals series come down to there was one team that was supremely talented. There was just you were not getting. It doesn't matter. You could have not complained to the refs, or you could have done X, Y, and Z. There was no way you're getting beyond that team. But that's not what this They look. Boston might win this thing 4-0, but the margin of error was much smaller than the series result is going to look like. And those things matter, and building a culture matters. And the reason I bring this up now is because Charles Lee is about to come to Charlotte, and his biggest challenge won't be, LaMelo Ball pick and rolls, Brandon Miller coming off screens. What do you do with Miles Bridges? His biggest challenge is going to be how do we get these guys, to want it and to do the hard things, to break the habits that have resulted in the Hornets not having the longest NBA playoff drought.
By the way, we've seen a star here start to complain about calls as his career went on in Kemba Walker. We can remember that at the very end of his tenure here in Charlotte. I got to a point where I got tired of seeing him in clutch big-time game winner moments look for fouls rather than hit the shot. Remember, Jeremy Lamb became our savior at the end of games because Kemba, when he would make the right pass, Jeremy Lamb would be there for the open shot, and Kemba would just look to get fouled every time. So when I say you can't manufacture a problem and create something that doesn't exist right now, that's not entirely true. Like Kemba, you want that happy medium. We wanted to see him get some of those star calls because he wasn't getting them. And then he started to complain a lot more. Like, it was weird. It was out of his character, who's considered the all-time good guy, top 5 good guy in the NBA at that time. So we'll see what happens with some of this stuff. Winning habits, baby. Hopefully Charles Lee can bring him over here to the Queen City. That's David Walker, looking fresh, so clean. Find him on Twitter at David B. Walker. Doug Branson, Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Listen to me, Walker Mail, every weekday from 12 to 3 on WFNZ via Wes and Walker. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. We'll be back with you on Monday.
Bye-bye.